Title is India Illiberal? And as it turns out, the title of Chidanand Rajghatta's book has no doubts about the answer. It's assertively called Illiberal India. And for good measure, the subtitle includes the phrase, the age of unreason. As you may know, it's a warm memoir about his ex-wife, Gauri Lankesh, and charts the contours of their relationship, sets them against the vicissitudes of India's political debates. Over the last week, it's been a pretty hectic time in India's newsrooms. On the 18th of October, for instance, the National Investigative Agency said it had found no evidence of the existence of love jihad, that almost comical conspiracy theory suggesting that Muslim men are lurking on street corners with some special seductive techniques up their street that allows them to instantly convince Hindu women to leap into relationships with them, merely so that these cads can convert them to Islam after that. If only it was so easy. Then we had the Shabarimala Controversy, which is being painted as a battle between tradition and constitutionalism, as crowds of Ayyappa devotees in Kerala prevented women between the age of 10 and 50 from worshipping in the shrine, even though the Supreme Court had ruled that they could do so. Yesterday, a court in Pune rejected the bail applications of human rights activists whom the state has labeled urban nakshals, even though the evidence against them is pretty flimsy and constantly changing. At the beginning of the week, we reported on the astonishing arrest of a defense analyst named Abhijit Iyer Mitra, who was taken into custody in Odisha for a series of jokey tweets, one of which mocked the Odias for claiming that the Rashgola had its origins in that state and not in Bengal. And on that score, I must claim that he wasn't exactly correct. To be pedantic about it, the Rashgola owes its origins neither to the Odias or the Bengalis, but to the Portuguese. And you can read all about it in an article that Scroll wrote a couple of years ago.
I wonder what the Spaniards have to say about that.
Spaniards, the Pope drew a line. The Spaniards got that side of the hemisphere. The Portuguese got this side. Presciently, many of these debates that have consumed us over the past few weeks find mention in Chidanand's book. Even the Rashgolas. In the preface, he writes, there is an impatience, resentment, anger in the air, whether one is discussing the origins of the Rashgola or who is greater among Tendulkar and Virat Kohli. And that's something on which our friend Mr. Guha will have much to say. So to begin with, Chidanand, do you believe India is illiberal, or are we merely sliding down the slope to illiberalism?
I think the preamble that you went through pretty much answers the question. It's a no-brainer. It's illiberal. It's not just illiberal. I'm now concerned that we're going down the slope to something even worse. It's endemic. It's consistent. You spoke of a controversy every day. To me, it seems every hour, and a lot of it is exacerbated by social media. I actually want to, the short answer is yes, of course, but for a slightly longer answer, I actually want to go into the topography of this particular area. Few of my friends know I actually literally grew up on the ground beneath your feet. My parents' house is right around the corner, and as kids, we'd actually come, the area between Kumarakripa guest house and the chief minister's house, which is Kaveri, and his office Krishna, which was built later. This used to be a mango grove. And as kids, we'd actually jump across the railway track, come here, shoot mangoes. Stolen mangoes are always more delicious. And then we'd actually jump the wall and go into the chief minister's house. And the chief minister in the late 60s was Virendra Patil. He was serving he was a first-term chief minister. And as kids, we jumped the wall, go into the chief minister's home compound, into the yard, and there was a big pond with goldfish. And as kids, we'd be playing with the goldfish, and the chief minister would come back from the assembly and see us playing in his front yard, and he'd shoo us home, saying, "Go home, it's dusk, you have to do your homework." I'm mentioning this because those were really genteel times. I'm not for a moment suggesting that it was liberal or tolerant times. I'm sure there were flashes of intolerance and illiberalism even there. But they were really genteel times. They were wonderful times. And a lot of it was also because we didn't have such, a hyper media, much of it social media. So the slide to me really began, much as we celebrate the arrival of internet and social media and all that, which started happening in the 90s, it also made our conversations more intense. I mean, there's a good side of it. It engaged a lot more people. But it also gave rise to a lot of intensity and a lot of illiberalism, because everybody who is 25 followers on Twitter is now a journalist, or a social commentator. You don't have to be an expert on anything. You can just put it out there, make it spread very fast. So a lot of it has happened in the last sort of 2 decades, and particularly in the last decade, I sense heightened sort of illiberalism, heightened intolerance, and like you said, every little thing. You can generate a controversy by the hour. And that to me is a scary prospect, and I have no idea where all this is going to go.
Twitter is a relatively new thing, and the number of people on Twitter is actually very small. Could you talk us through how social media is actually resulting in the polarization of broader society?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, Twitter is just one example. The whole engagement, and this, by the way, this illiberalism is not India-specific. As you noted, I live in U.S. I have lived in Washington, D.C. area for 25 years now, but this is my hometown. This is my home turf. I come here very often, thrice a year. And last year my family and I spent 10 months in Bangalore. My wife, who is a political scientist, actually made the case when Trump was elected because she was so distraught. She said, I want to take a break from a country, with too many guns and crazies. Let's go to Bangalore. And we come here and we find that, one of our dearest friends was assassinated. So there were crazies with guns here too. So we, as journalists, sometimes I find I'm too much of an insider in terms of, social media. But you can see by the volume, by the intensity of the conversations, and the sheer ability to spread falsehoods, both in the U.S. and in India, and pretty much across the world now. How quickly. I remember at the very early stages of social media, I don't know if you guys remember, there was this controversy about Ganesh drinking milk. I don't know how many of you all remember. This was, maybe 10. It was very early days. But I was astonished because the first call I got about that was from a colleague, Prema Vishwanathan, who's now in Bangalore. She was in Singapore, and she alerted me to it. Right? I mean, we're talking of maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Now it's even faster. So I just find that it's worldwide, it's instant, and a lot of it is toxic. And we all celebrated Twitter and Facebook in the early days as something which would be constructive, where you could engage constructively, and we still do. We don't have to throw the sort of baby with the bathwater. There are good things about it, but I find toxicity is, to me, is more scary than the constructive aspect of it. And some of us, my wife, for instance, has taken a break. She doesn't want to do Facebook anymore. And I'm a very, very reluctant Twitter user because I find it's like stepping into a sewage pond. You come into Twitter and it's scary. You put out a comment, it can go anyways. There are people who are very quick to take offense. So the gentleness which I spoke of in the 60s or 70s, or even well into the 80s, I lived in Bangalore till 85, which is when I moved to Delhi. And even in the 80s, Bangalore was a lovely place. I just find, of course, everything else, including the weather and traffic, has gone downhill. But I just find the intensity of India is scary, but so is the intensity of the US, for that matter. So it's across the world.
In 2017, you wrote a column saying that India should be called the Republic of Outrageoustan. We own outrage, you said. We discharge outrage on an industrial, nay Olympian scale. We are alpha and uber outrageous. We have the outrage gene burnt into our DNA. We are the outrage superpower. Are we really outrage superpower? Trump's America sounds pretty bad too.
Yeah, you got me there. You got exactly good. Well, I don't know, good and bad competition. I think more than good competition. But you're right. I mean, so I still think we have the head on them. I think there are parts of America which are full of outrage. But to me, it seems all of India is in ferment all the time. In the U.S., it's relatively new, and we talked about this before we came here, I think, over the phone. And this is a theory I'm still sort of developing in my mind. To me, it seems that over the last 25, 30 years, the political pendulum or the ideological pendulum, which is to move just off center a little bit, has started to swing wider and wider. And I'll explain this. So when I first went to the US, my very first trip was in '88, and I was there when the election was going on. George Bush, the older George Bush, and Mike Dukakis were the candidates, and I remember, so Bush won, and he was, slightly right of center, and 4 years later, Clinton got into the fray, and he was slightly left of center. He had to moderate his position to be just left of center, more towards the center. And then after Clinton, there was the younger George Bush, and he was further right of center. And after Bush, there was Obama, who was further left of center. So now you can see the pendulum is starting to swing wider. And then now there's Trump, who has gone further right. And who knows, the next election, going by what's happening in New York and California and many of the places, we could go further left. So it seems to me that in the US, at least, I don't know how it is in India, I haven't processed the Indian political system, that the ideological pendulum is swinging wider and wider. That's one. Two, I also feel, because I went to the US in 93, 94, at what I call the start of the internet age. The first 6 or 7 years, I can measure my stay in browser terms, like Eliot did it with coffee spoons. Netscape 1 was pretty much born the first year I was there. Then there was Netscape 2, 3, 4. Every year there was a new browser update. And now I look back and think 25 years of incredibly fast globalization and development, right? I mean, globalization really kicked off, particularly for us here with the liberalization. I still remember the very first time the Star TV worldwide telecast took place. Michael Jackson's song Black or White was a simultaneous worldwide release in 92 or 93. And since then, now we live in a really, fast-paced world where, time zones really don't matter. Everything is simultaneous release, including the latest Apple iPhone. And I now look back and I'm starting to feel that everything happened so fast, so quickly, that it left a lot of people across the world unnerved, right? So this is sometimes I think this is the whole rightward movement, or the anger and resentment is from what I call the constancy of the unnerved. These are, whether it's in India or in the United States, these are people who were unprepared and who were taken aback by the sheer speed of globalization, right? Whether it's right wing here. I mean, essentially, these are all nativists who were overrun by globalists, right? When most of us are the globalists, and these are the nativists who, so cling on to old values, as simply were not prepared for the rapidity with which the world changed. And boy, it changed rapidly. So to me, these are the two major sort of themes now, the globalization, the speed, the changes in technology, the arrival of the internet, and also the gradual widening of this political pendulum, and the conversation is becoming more and more, toxic and heated. The centrist positions are sort of diminishing now.
All right, at this stage, we've got only 10 minutes left. So let's take questions. Please ask a question. Please don't make a comment. I will rudely cut you off if you ask a comment, if you make a comment. The gentleman here. Can we move the mics around, please?
So as you said, the pace of technology is moving faster, right? And as we see as technologists, I think it would be moving more faster. Like, so how do you see it changing the discourse of politics even like further? And what are the strategies people can have to like cope with it? Because if the rate is going faster, like as we talk in terms of exponentiation, it's like this, right? And it's going to be getting like higher, greater, faster rate. So how do people cope with it? How the politics or the governance changes now?
I haven't the foggiest idea, to be, to be honest. In the US, it's becoming less and less. I mean, as it is, when I first went to the US, I was really surprised. Their elections, the elections there are nothing like our elections here. The kind of heat and dust and passion that you have here, there it's very sterile, very sanitized. If you notice political rallies in the US, it's all very partisan. Right? It's all cheerleaders. Sometimes it feels like North Korea or the old Soviet Union, because it's all the faithful there. And now with this internet, I mean, everything has become more and more sort of disjointed, in the sense it's all choreographed. You don't have sort of natural political rallies. It's all either Republicans go to Republican rallies, Democrats go to Democrat rallies. Unlike here you go to a Maidan, you don't know if a Janata Dal party rally could have people from all sides. People genuinely come here to listen. There they come, just to cheer the leader. And I don't know, with greater technology, a lot of it, including, fundraising, for instance. I mean, you routinely get emails from Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, please contribute, to this race, this thing. So retail politics is very different. And now, over the last 3-4 years, we have discovered now with Trump that it's now open to all kinds of influences. You really know, every day they are discovering that, the Chinese are into it. Now all the countries have discovered that you can actually start fingering the American elections. For years and years, this was a country which actually messed around with elections in Iran, in South America, in Latin American republics. Now the Iranians and the Chinese know that you can spread havoc in American elections too, that you can plant stuff on Facebook. The social media is open to everybody. So it's really hard to figure out where this is all going. I mean, the honest answer is I don't know, but it is scary. And you get the sense that you can't trust everything. Somebody asked me, so what's going to happen in the midterm elections? The answer is all the polls show that the Democrats are leading. They might take over the House. They might even win the Senate. But because of what happened in 2016, when all the polls showed that Hillary was going to win even a few hours before the result, everyone's scared to actually stick their neck out. So I just have to say, we don't know.
There's a question there?
Yeah. So, sir, I wanted to ask you, so when we say that, when the question comes that is India illiberal, do we mean that the Indian civilization or the Indian culture that has been continuing for so many years and has successfully integrated many different cultures within it, many have come and, got an acceptance here. So is it a modern phenomenon, or does it have its roots in the civilization as a whole or the culture as a whole? That's my question. Being illiberal, being intolerant, from your perspective.
My personal view is that we take this very sort of self-comforting view that we are a liberal society, and we have very nice, comforting shibboleths and phrases written into our civilization, into our constitution, into our discourse, like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or Sarva Dharma. In the US, it's becoming less and less. I mean, as it is, when I first went to the US, I was really surprised. Their elections, the elections there are nothing like our elections here. The kind of heat and dust and passion that you have here, there it's very sterile, very sanitized. If you notice political rallies in the US, it's all very partisan. Right? It's all cheerleaders. Sometimes it feels like North Korea or the old Soviet Union, because it's all the faithful there. And now with this internet, I mean, everything has become more and more sort of disjointed, in the sense it's all choreographed. You don't have sort of natural political rallies. It's all either Republicans go to Republican rallies, Democrats go to Democrat rallies. Unlike here you go to a Maidan, you don't know if a Janata Dal party rally could have people from all sides. People genuinely come here to listen. There they come, just to cheer the leader. And I don't know, with greater technology, a lot of it, including, fundraising, for instance. I mean, you routinely get emails from Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, please contribute, to this race, this thing. So retail politics is very different. And now, over the last 3-4 years, we have discovered now with Trump that it's now open to all kinds of influences. You really do. Every day they are discovering that, the Chinese are into it. Now all the countries have discovered that you can actually start fingering the American elections. They were for years and years, this was a country which actually messed around with elections in Iran, in South America, in Latin American republics. Now the Iranians and the Chinese know that you can spread havoc in American elections too, that you can, plant stuff on Facebook. The social media is open to everybody. So it's really hard to figure out where this is all going. I mean, the honest answer is I don't know, but it is scary. And, you get the sense that you can't trust everything. Somebody asked me, so what's going to happen in the midterm elections? The answer is all the polls show that the Democrats are leading. They might take over the House. They might even win the Senate. But because of what happened in 2016, when all the polls showed that Hillary was going to win even a few days, few hours before the result, everyone's scared to actually stick their neck out. So I just have to say, we don't know.
There's a question there?
Yeah. So, sir, I wanted to ask you, so when we say that, when the question comes that is India illiberal, do we mean that the Indian civilization or the Indian culture that has been continuing for so many years and has successfully integrated many different cultures within it, many have come and, got an acceptance here. So is it a modern phenomenon, or does it have its roots in the civilization as a whole or the culture as a whole? That's my question. Being illiberal, being intolerant, from your perspective.
My personal view is that we take this very sort of self-comforting view that we are a liberal society, and we have very nice, comforting shibboleths and phrases written into our civilization, into our constitution, into our discourse, like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam or Sarvadharma, right? We can barely keep our society together. So we're a very incredibly complex country. I just feel, and particularly over the last few years, and it all climaxed, of course, last year with the assassination of Gaur Lankesh, and even before that, with Pansare, Dabholkar, that actually brought home to me that we are an incredibly illiberal society, and we are sliding further down that path.
There was a question there?
Sir, here, over here. Hello, sir. Yes. So my question is the comment that India is illiberal, but don't you think it's a global phenomena with Brazil's Bolsonaro or Trump or China or Duterte? So singling India out would be some sort of a bias. And also, don't you think it is because of a failure of a liberal politics over a period of time where they did not deliver on the practical problems that people have moved towards a more polarizing politics where their immediate requirements or needs are what they actually want to be solved before moving on to equality or other
Thanks. Let's take another question also.
It's a blunt question. Liberalism has failed. People are fed up with liberals, because of which they are going that way. And isn't that the bigger question? Or the second point is, people like Ramachandra Guha, they have to work painstakingly through thousands of pages to make an argument. Isn't that a pet, lazy argument to say that everything is illiberal, not understanding the other side? Thank you.
Sure. Take on both? Yeah, just to start with you. Of course, that is exactly the argument I've made, that it's not, if you heard me, I said it's not just India, right? And I also said it's also the United States, right? And like you said, it's also Brazil, and it's Italy, and in all these places. One. And two, to answer, the other gentleman's question, I absolutely agree that, liberalism has failed, which is why, and I also went through why, because, technology did not address everybody's aspirations. There was a whole constituency which was unprepared, right? There was an unprepared constituency which cannot handle globalization, which don't have the skill sets and the mindset to handle the speed with which globalization has happened. And I'll be very honest, I keep saying this. a lot of liberals romanticized Obama's 8 years, right? And it wasn't till Trump was elected that a lot of people are looking back at those 8 years, and we suddenly see that particularly people who lived on the East Coast and West Coast of the United States, who did well under, they do well under any regime because they have the skill sets, that there was a whole middle of the country, and I'm actually a little familiar with it because my wife is from the Midwest, and she's a political scientist, and she kept warning me, saying, look, everybody is romanticizing Obama and his this thing, but a lot of people and a lot of concerns were left unaddressed, and we finally found out when 60 million people or whatever voted for Trump, despite everything that he is. So now you think back and say, oh my God, how bad was the Obama era that 60 million people, you know, said, we're going to vote for this crazy man, no matter what he stands for. So you're right. I mean, we don't for a moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, liberalism is bad. In the long run, okay, we live in a world which will be progressive and moderate. You know, these are phases we'll go through. Even India is going through that. US will go through that. But I'm confident there'll be corrective mechanisms. You know.